Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Get Wealth podcast. Today I have here Ryan Weimer, another real estate investor, entrepreneur, kind of the people that I like to get on this podcast. Since the beginning, it's kind of evolved into more of a real estate podcast, and that's what I'm interested in. So that's what I like to learn about. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's just start off with, how did you get into real estate? I remember you were mentioning earlier you were an engineer first, and I know those guys do pretty well. So what's the reason for the transition there?
Yeah, so I went to a small engineering school in Colorado, and first job out of school, worked for an oil and gas company as a mechanical engineer. So times are really good. That's back when oil was like $110 a barrel, and it was crazy. Like there'd be open bars all the time, and I'd get like free tickets to all the major Denver sporting events. And it was back when Peyton Manning was playing for the Broncos. So it was sweet. We got free tickets and all that stuff all the time. And there were tons of perks with that job. I was working downtown, it was a great gig. But then the market shifted and oil completely tanked and I got laid off. And this was just like 2 years out of college. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I never even thought that was a remote possibility, right? Like when you're entering the workforce, especially with that kind of degree, the whole mantra is like, oh, you're like putting in the extra effort to get a good degree so that you can get a good job, not that you can get fired from a job, right? So it completely knocked me off my feet. Like just to be totally candid, like they didn't pay out my bonus for the prior year or my vacation or anything. So I felt pretty cheated too. And it was just a big kick in the teeth at the time. But it was, looking back, just like any breakup or any adversity that happens to you in life, right? It's how you handle it. And it's usually a catapult forward to the next thing. So I cold turkey just decided that I wanted to do the beach thing for a little bit while I was young and single and move out to San Diego. So I moved out there without a job, and luckily my aunt and uncle had like a spare room that I could crash with for a couple months until I found a job. And I found a spectacular job with a semiconductor company that makes phone and computer chips. And I was a project manager, so I was flying all around the world overseeing these jobs and these different projects. And it was, we went to South Korea a bunch, Taiwan a bunch, Portland, Oregon, went to New York a few times, went to Japan once. So I got to see, and it was all on the company dime, right? So I got to see a lot of cool things and I was loving it. But it came at the expense of, after a while that got old, right? So I was, weekends and holidays, I was really sacrificing for this company to fly everywhere. And it was great for a while, but eventually, I wanted a promotion because I was putting in so many hours and sacrificing a lot. Mm-hmm. And at that point, they kind of shafted me and just said, no, actually, we're a Dutch-owned company and we need somebody in that position that speaks Dutch for that promotion. And so when that happened, it was kind of like the second straw. And I'm being nice about how that happened. It was actually a little worse than that. But it was kind of like the second straw, like, okay, the corporate life isn't going to take care of you. You're always going to be susceptible to somebody else. You're going to be at the mercy of someone else's decision. So how are you going to take responsibility for creating your own path and destiny? And for me, that was real estate. So in the simplest way possible, because I looked into, there was a phase of like 6 months after that happened where I was looking into like ATM machines, like a window repair business. Like every entrepreneur goes through this phase where they're like trying to figure out what to do. And they're like, I just need a great idea. Like once I get the great idea that nobody's ever thought of, like I'm going to think of this new app, right? And so we all have those creative juices start flowing. And real estate was just the most proven path that I saw. to financial freedom. I didn't need this grand idea. I just knew if I could buy a couple rental properties a year and get a few $100s from each of those, then I could eventually replace my income before I was 60 and retire with a 401k, right? So
Yeah, that's crazy how that worked. That's actually the reason I started this podcast. Is kind of like you're saying, you just want to know where to start. So I actually would just go door to door in Paradise Valley, Arizona, which is like really nice neighborhood, mansions. And I would just go knock on their door and be like, hey, would you do an interview for my podcast? I'm trying to learn how to get wealth. And it worked a few times. Then I started branching out to social media, and I saw a pattern of all these real estate people, real estate. Every once in a while, there'd be, someone who said they were like a venture capitalist or whatever. There's money in other places, but real estate seems like the most proven and repeated path. That's where it's like, here, it's laid out for you. Just go and do the work that no one else wants to do, which is kind of what you've done. So how did you find out about real estate? Did you have a buddy that said, hey, this is kind of a cool thing, or what?
I bought the only way I could afford a place in San Diego to buy was to get like the cheapest condo, because I wanted to live by the beach, right? So like my whole thing was, how am I going to make this work? So I had to go cheap, which I had to get a condo, and then I house hacked. So it's a 2-bedroom, and I just rented the other room to somebody in order to make the payment work. And I still didn't really know about rental properties or what I was doing. It was just what I had to do to afford it. And then I knew if I buy my first place, then in a few years, like I can buy a bigger place, right? And that's just what people generally think. But then my realtor at the time told me that I should check out Bigger Pockets. And so I started watching some of their YouTube stuff, and then got on, just religiously started listening to the podcast and got totally hooked. And there was an episode, I think it's in the hundreds, with Tom Kroll on there about wholesaling. And I just thought, like, this guy is so full of crap, or he's actually truthful, and that's why he's like so elated. And it sounds like he just drank like 4 cups of coffee, right? Like, is this guy really authentic? Does this actually work? Does marketing to off-market properties to find distressed owners, like, is this guy just blowing smoke or not? And ultimately that led me to try it and see for myself.
Yeah, and it's crazy. There's so much opportunity out there. So what was that first deal like? Were you still working with the other job, and then you kind of dipped your feet a little bit?
Yeah, it took me a long time to let go of the golden handcuffs. I only just quit my job like 4 or 5 months ago. I bought my first, second, I basically had 12 doors by the time I quit, and I was only holding on to it because, number one, it was during COVID, so we could work from home. I wasn't traveling. And since I was overseeing stuff, I was really only working like 15 to 20 hours a week, like actual work. Yeah. So I had a bunch of time on my hands to start the real estate stuff, but I wanted the ability to have a conventional loan, right? Mm-hmm. I wanted to still be able to buy rental properties, because I didn't know about creative finance yet, or seller financing, or any of that stuff. I just thought, until I have cash, a conventional loan is really the only way I can buy a rental property. So
yeah, got it. And so you got 12 doors. Were you doing wholesaling at that point yet, or when did things start snowballing to where you're like, okay, this is where it's at?
Yeah, I bought the first 2 off the MLS, and then I started writing handwritten yellow letters. And it was brutal. Like I would spend like 5 or 6 hours while I was cold calling, started cold calling at the same time, and I would be writing yellow letters at the same time I was cold calling. And it took a long time to get my first off market deal. I actually got one on Craigslist first, but truly it was from another wholesaler, and I didn't even know at the time. But truly, then my first off market deal after that happened to be a fourplex that I got from a cold call. So the yellow letter thing, it got me some leads, it got me into some conversations, but in the amount of time and money that it took me to do all those yellow letters, right, I could talk to like way more people with a dialer and get on the phone with somebody. So
Yeah, it seems like that's, I mean, I don't know. I've done 3 deals to this point, and one's hopefully getting signed soon. I'm not really sure where it's at this moment, but the tools that are available, like you mentioned, a dialer and cold calling. I mean, I don't know. I could not see myself just writing letters all day long. It doesn't seem as effective for sure. Is that kind of what your business is now, is cold calling and texting, or?
We've tailored down the texting a little bit just because it's becoming more regulated, and we don't want to get shut off. We want to really like target it, because before, you have these companies that are doing like 20 or 30,000 texts in a day, and they're just blasting entire cities and entire zip codes. And so people didn't like that very much, but it's taken a while to get, you know, the government's attention to get some regulation on it, which is neither here nor there. But we've dialed back the texting a little bit, but cold calling is by far our number one marketing method. So I love it because first of all, it's cheaper. It costs you your time, right, until you can hire it out and get a virtual assistant or get someone else calling for you. But also, it's not something, it's harder. It's not something that a lot of people like to do or are good at. Mailing and PPC and the texting and all that stuff is more expensive, but it's also really nice, right? Like you get leads coming in, and you don't really have to have those uncomfortable cold conversations right away. So
Got it. So how long before you started hiring out, or are you still doing on the phones, or what's your strategy?
So I haven't done a whole lot of calling myself in about 6 to 8 months. But I've noticed, excuse me, I've noticed the need for me to start doing that with my team again, mostly for training purposes, but also it's such a valuable skill. Even if now, like, I'm talking to a contractor, or I'm talking to a developer, or even like I'm talking to planning and zoning, those negotiating skills and mirroring and doing a stealth mismatch, or like different techniques that you learn on the phone, don't just apply to motivated sellers. They apply to way more. And if you keep that skill sharp, like it really opens a lot of other avenues for you too. So it's not something that I've done a whole lot of recently because I have a team doing it for me, but I have seen the need for myself to start refining that again, because you get rusty just like anything. So
yeah, it's the whole thing is really just about interacting with people, right? That's what it comes down to. Is that's the core of it. Someone, like you're saying, is distressed, or they have a problem, and you're coming in and being able to communicate effectively. Like, even if you have all of the abilities to make their life a million times better, people don't understand that, or it's your job to be able to help them understand that. And if you keep putting your foot in your mouth and don't know what to say, or you say the wrong things, or you make it sound like they're getting scammed, that's a hard thing to do. So I guess it just takes a lot of practice, I guess.
Yeah, just like anything, right? You wouldn't, the people that are not successful at it are usually the people that either try to do too much too quick, right? Like, you wouldn't want to, if you're training for a marathon, you wouldn't want to run like 10 miles on the first day. So with dialing, like if you're just starting out and you don't even have a dialer, which, by the way, getting a dialer, I know it's only like $100 to $150 a month, but you can get through like 10 times the amount of calls that if you're hand dialing. So it's absolutely a worthwhile investment. That's one of the first things that I would get. But it's just, you want to do like 20 minutes the first day, and then you want to do a half hour the second day. And then the second week, you want to do an hour per day. And then, right. So you start building up, because at first, like, I just like anyone, you have this fear when you're on the phone, like, am I going to say the right things? Am I going to screw this up? Like, I don't even know what I'm doing. But it doesn't matter. You're just building up the calluses, the strength, the expertise, and you get 1% better each day, 1% better each day, and build off of that. So even when I have new people that join my team, I don't ask them to do like 6 or 7 hours of calling a day. In fact, anything more than 3, just, we're humans, right? We start to, like, our tonality goes down, our energy goes down, we start to lose interest. So just a little bit at a time really helps.
Yeah, that makes sense. So are you doing deals in your own market? Because I know you're from Idaho, right? Are you over there, or are you virtually other places?
Yep. So I'm in San Diego, but our entire operation is in Idaho, actually. So I am virtual.
Oh,
So I
wow.
don't do any deals in San Diego at all. I've thought about it, but when I was starting, I was looking, and this was years ago, I was looking for a cheaper place to buy rental properties, right? That was my primary focus, was the financial freedom and the rental income. And California was just way too expensive to cash flow. So I was looking for like secondary markets to start stuff in. And yeah.
That's awesome. Um, so when did you get into doing creative deals? I see your sub two hat. I watch all Pace's stuff on YouTube. It's a game changer. I haven't done a creative deal, but I mean, I'm always pushing for that, even more than the wholesale. How's your experience? What was your first creative deal like?
Gosh, our first creative deal. Man, so first of all, creative finance is the best, hands down. The challenge is, number one, if you're bringing new people on your team or even yourself, it can become a bit of a crutch when someone says they show an initial objection and they want a really high price. Instead of like really digging into the pain and motivation, you jump right into the term sale. Like, well, what if we can offer you more than anyone else with payments to equity, right? Like you're kind of skipping the digging into the pain and motivation that most people have to do to get a cash sale. So it can be tricky jumping to that right away, at least what I found with my team. And they do take longer too, because so many people have no idea that you can even sell a property on terms. It's amazing how many people don't even know. They think the only way that you can sell is with cash. A lot of them even think you have to use a realtor. So what we've found to be most successful is, again, judging the seller's situation. This doesn't apply every time, but if you're dealing with somebody who, they're not at risk of losing everything to the bank, or they're not in a situation where they are losing the home in 2 months, we say, well, I assume you'd probably want to sell it on payments to equity, because that's what I do with all my rental properties.
Oh.
So we don't even ask them. We don't ask them, would you consider it? Because they shoot it down 9 times out of 10 just because they don't know what the heck we're talking about.
That's really good.
Yeah. But if you say that line, like, oh, okay, yeah, I assume you probably want to sell it on payments to equity. You can say terms too. I assume you want to sell it on terms, just because that's what I do with all my rental properties. If you don't need the cash, then I mean, that makes the most sense for you. And just that confidence level that you say it with, and you're making an assumption, the conversation goes in a completely different direction than if you ask, well, if I can pay more, would you consider selling on terms? They're like, no, I want the cash, because they understand cash. They don't understand the terms. So it's that small little phrasing change we made back in January, because we were finding it really, really, we were like, man, this Pace guy is amazing. The sub 2 program is incredible. The value is absurd. Like I can't find any mentorship with as much material as that. That's beneficial, but we were struggling because we were asking it in the wrong way, which made it feel to the seller like we weren't certain about what we were asking. So that little change, all of a sudden we got like 2 creative deals that month, 3 the next month. to the following month. So it really started to gain traction, but it does, again, be careful with that too, because it can hold you back a little bit if you're always jumping right to terms from actually getting to the pain and motivation, which is why someone is motivated to sell, right?
Yeah. So before you did your first one, was it like, did you have any hesitation with how does this work, getting it on a contract? It's not just a simple, I mean, like you know, a wholesale, just a cash deal, you just write the number there and then you get it signed and it goes to the title and that's that. With a creative deal, like you got to put the terms in there and then probably have an attorney look over it. That seems a little bit intimidating. I've never done it myself. So was that a hurdle for you? And like, how did you actually just pull the trigger on your first creative deal?
So it was a hurdle, mentally, just mentally, but that's exactly what your title company, or if you're in a state with a closing attorney, that they're
Yeah.
there for. So in our contract, we just have like an other items section at the bottom.
Mhm.
And we literally just wrote out, down payment to seller is this, the remaining part of the purchase price to be divided up into payments over this time. Is there interest or is it principal only? Like literally all the terms of the note, and send it to the title company. And they'll tell you like, hey, this part doesn't read correctly. In order for us to make this work, we need an addendum with this, this, and this. Or they'll say, yep, looks good to me. Who do you want to make payments to? Do you want us to set up long-term escrow for you to make payments to them and then them to the seller? Or do you want to use like another servicing company to handle the actual payments of it? But no, I think we had the exact same thought. That is just a mental hurdle though. As long as you're relying on your title company to correct you, you can say whatever.
That's pretty cool. Because Pace always does like these slam dunk deals where he'll get 0% interest and zero down payment. Have you ever done one like that?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
tell me about one of those.
So we had a deal with a mobile home, which by the way, if you're not hitting the mobile homes with land list, it is a freaking gold mine. Nobody goes after that. And they just don't think that it's desirable, but really, the value is in what that land is zoned. And oftentimes mobile home owners, it has to be if they own the land, because if it's just a mobile home, it basically has no value unless it's
Right.
like 2000s or greater. But you can get a lot of great terms deals that way. So you can buy something, you can overpay, you can pay like 200 grand for a crappy mobile home on terms, principal only payments, and then sell it to a buyer that can't qualify for conventional financing with a bank. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, so you can buy it at, so we had one that we bought, I think it was 210 purchase price, zero down, principal only payments of 1,200 a month, which she was only making like 700 a month on rent. So for her, she was getting her price and she was getting a higher payment than she was used to. She didn't care about interest because we were paying more than the property was worth. But for us, then we could sell that to a tenant buyer at like 230 or 240 with 10 grand down, and we put nothing down. And then we can just put interest on that note above the payment, like 1,300, 1,400, 1,800 a month, whatever it is.
Wow.
So, but long story short, we bought that on principal only payments and then discovered it was zoned for high density multifamily. So we cleared the mobile home off it, and we're actually in the process of talking to the city to get it approved for a multifamily development. So
That's exciting.
yeah.
Nice.
So we have four. It's crazy how much this stuff compounds too, because we've got 4 multifamily developments in different phases of construction and entitlements right now, and getting a mentor in your market has been really key for that too. But no, man, the terms thing, especially for people that don't have a high income W-2 and are looking for ways to get into rental properties, that is easily the best path to do it, because the Burr method gets, which by the way, I've used tons of times. It's a great, very powerful method, but unless you have a W-2 job that's paying enough and you can qualify for these things, it doesn't apply to a lot of people. So creative way is the way to go for sure.
Yeah, that sounds like it. And even just your story so far, I mean, so how long ago was it since you said 5 months ago you quit the day job?
Yeah,
That's crazy. And now you're building multifamily units, and someone listening to that probably thinks like, this is insane. You're going so quickly. But I find it's not entirely uncommon. Not that it's not difficult and there's not a lot of work that goes into it, but the possibilities that are out there in real estate to really just build an empire for yourself and create wealth. How long do you think it is realistically to get from your job that you don't like to financially free, like for whatever that means for somebody? How long is that realistic?
if someone's dedicating all in, anywhere from like 40 to 60 hours a week, and you start with nothing, I really believe you can get to it within 5 years.
Which that's so quick.
and fast. And that's if you start from like if you double dip like I did and you have a pretty good job and do it on the side, I mean, you really got to grind like nights, weekends. There's a lot of sacrifice that goes into it, but you're doing it for yourself. So it gives you so much energy because you feel like I'm building this for myself. Nobody's making me do this. You know, what I kill, I get to eat. And it's just the most empowering feeling to be able to have a proven model of something that does that. And you can get it to it faster than 5 years. I think for me, I think it took about just about a little over 3 years. So but it's different for everyone too. And it depends on what your goals are too. Like my goal, and this is the conversation that I have with everybody, because that is one of the top questions that always gets asked is when to quit your job. Like, when should I do it? When should I do it? And my question to them is, well, how bad do you hate your job? Because if number one goal is I need to quit this job ASAP, then target a market that has really high cash flow and get a couple rental properties in St. Louis for really cheap, or Kansas City, or some of these Midwestern markets. You can cash flow like 800 to $1,000 on each of those. They cost like 100 grand or less. And all of a sudden 2 or 3 of those is enough to get just to cover living expenses or whatever the number is for you. Right. But if you don't mind double dipping for a while, because that's what's going to really like compound your wealth, then I would just do both at the same time for as long as you can. And then there's a day when you're like, holy crap, my dollar per hour that I'm making doing this is actually way higher than in my job. So now it makes sense to quit. So,
yeah. And it almost seems like there's a certain amount of, whether it's in real estate or not, but like financial security that everyone, even if they don't enjoy negotiating deals or closing, on wholesale deals, just so that you have something to fall back on, or like that you don't have to completely suck up to the guy who's putting food on your table. It just seems like a necessary thing to meet the bottom level of living a happy life.
totally.
Yeah. So what's your overall like big picture goal? Are you just trying to scale this thing to the moon?
No, I'm definitely not that person. I think I have one thing that's really helped me is daily goal setting. I'm super into goal setting, so I'm very meticulous about and I'm not perfect, but I'm a big believer in writing down daily goals, monthly goals, quarterly goals, a 5-year vision, a 10-year vision, and actually taking the time to literally write that stuff down. Because what happens is it gives you a sense of clarity. You don't always know what you want. Like, yeah, you want financial freedom, and yeah, you want time freedom, and you want to build this for your family. But to actually define what that looks like, because there's so many avenues to pick. I mean, you can wholesale, you can do commercial real estate, you can do self-storage, you can be a realtor, you can do flips, right? So you can do creative finance. There's too many avenues to pick. But the most important thing is you just get clarity on like, what do you actually want? And then just go all in on that. So for me, it's time freedom, number one, and then building something that runs on autopilot or with very little interaction by me. And it takes a really, really long time to get to that point. You have to hire some really good A players, and that's a big challenge. For me right now is just hiring in general, is finding really good people, because that's what every good business is comprised of. But we have, our main market is Idaho. We've been doing anywhere from 3 to 7 deals a month there for the past year and a half. And, we keep a lot of those as rentals. We do flips. We don't do as much wholesaling as we used to, just because the market's been so hot that if we can make like triple on a flip than we can on a wholesale, then yeah, it probably makes sense to do the flip, right? So, but getting that to a point where it's totally self-sufficient and we have no dips in deal flow, and I've removed myself at least mostly from the business. Maybe I still spend like 5 hours a week on it. That's the goal. And then we can look at adding another market somewhere virtually and doing this, replicating the same model. But the one thing that I see happens to a lot of people is they get shiny object syndrome, and they try to do too many things at once. And it's happened to me too. Actually, this past quarter was we definitely, our deal flow decreased and everything, just because I had too many things going on with the developments and flips. And you take your eye off the ball and you put your focus into one area, and that's what grows. So I think, getting that level of focus and on clarity and what you really want, and really just being patient and taking one thing at a time is hard for most entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So let's kind of stay on that of knowing where to focus your energy and time. So like for me, for example, I'm just trying to find discounted properties, and whatever I can do with them, that's what I want to do. And it turns out wholesaling is usually kind of where that works out first. Do you think it's better to just focus everything on wholesaling, or would you recommend looking at some of those as fix and flips early on, or buying rentals, or how do you spread out your deals? Because if you do all of them fix and flips, it seems like that could be a problem.
Yeah. So I would say, in order to get into the flipping game, you first, and this is my personal opinion, you really need to solidify your deal flow.
Yeah.
Or you can do that. So if you're still a one-man band, keep wholesaling and keep doing that until you have about 3 months in reserves, and you can make your first hire for a virtual assistant or someone to automate some of the marketing for you that you're doing, whether it's calling or texting or mailing or whatever. And then you're still doing all the follow-up calls, you're still getting all the deals under contract, you're making revenue that way. Then you look to hire an acquisitions person that can start getting the deals under contract for you. Those 2 hires will get back a really large chunk of your time, and then you can start looking at, okay, maybe I want to flip this one, and maybe you do 1 flip at a time to get started. But
yeah,
the wholesaling thing is sweet, man. I mean, every time that we're doing 5 flips right now at once. And there are days when I'm like, man, I kind of wish I would have wholesaled one of those, because this is doing that many at once. It's just nonstop bad news. Stuff always comes up. Right. So,
yeah,
and I say that with a grain of salt, because the numbers still make sense for us to flip it versus wholesale it. But
right.
As you evolve in this, and as you really become aware of what your emotional energy and time is worth, not just the revenue that's being generated. Because if 3 out of your 5 flips are going bad, and then and you're trying to manage contractors and deal with that mess, if you don't have someone to do it for you, that's going to have a negative impact on other parts of your business. And maybe we're humans, right? So if we're having a bad day, then it spills into other parts of our life. And I think it's really important to just keep that context and healthy boundaries there. So,
yeah. So what's that like for you? Do you have a daily regimen you need to do? Like, you got to get to the gym at this time and you'd have this diet and sleep schedule, or are you more just flowing with it? Or how do you organize your life in a way that you can be the most effective?
I'm a big Miracle Morning person. That's a fantastic book. For me, I'm not a huge reader, especially in the mornings. I'm more of an auditory learner. So I'll wake up and usually at around like 5:15 or 5:30, I'll go to the gym around 6. I'll work out from like 6 to 7 or 6 to 7:15. And I'll just listen to a podcast, usually real estate related of some kind, because the journey, and I'm sure you can relate to this too, but the path of doing this, you can feel like you're on an island sometimes and you're alone and you don't have people to talk to, right? It's the same reason why you meet up with Steve on those runs sometimes in the morning, right? Is because being around other people like that gives you that energy and that this is possible and I'm going to go crush it attitude. And if you don't have that constantly in your ear or around you, you start to feel defeated and you start to get negative and you're like second guessing everything. Am I spending the right time in the right areas? What am I doing wrong? I haven't gotten a deal in 3 months. What's going on? Right. And so that kind of routine in the morning really just gets me started right on the right foot. So I'll listen to that while I work out. I'll come back and shower, and then we'll have our daily acquisitions meeting for the day with my acquisitions guys right first thing in the morning at 8 o'clock, from 8 to 9 or 8 to 8:30. We'll go through, did we hit our metrics for yesterday, which are number of follow-ups completed? Did we get appointments scheduled? That house is weird to comp. I don't know what the value is. We'll walk through that. So we'll talk all things deals for that first half hour to start the day. Then have a little bit of a break so I can kind of get some quiet time to assess okay, these are the top 3 things that I need to knock out for the day for my daily goal setting. And then we'll roll into a meeting at 10 o'clock with our virtual assistants. And that one is all about affirmations and how to handle seller objections, and doing a live listen to a call calibration, a recorded call that one of the VAs did. And we all listened to it together and learned from it. Hey, when you said this, I think you should say this here. Hey, your tone was great. Your energy was good. Ask this instead of that. So that's another learning tool. And then the whole rest of the day is just whatever my top 3 priorities are. And after I knock out those top 3 priorities, then I can do whatever I want. I can, look up deals from other wholesalers, or talk to my general contractor about where we can save some money on a budget for this flip, or, do some interviews for hiring. But that all comes after all that. So that's what I just described as every day, Monday through Friday.
Dang, that sounds like a power schedule. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not perfect, right? But what I've noticed is if I don't do that in the morning, I'm just not as productive, and I'm not as I'm lethargic, and I don't bring the same energy. So
yeah, I completely agree. And kind of like what you were saying with being able to talk to people like that, or hear just a podcast, that's really what this has done for me. It's probably, I mean, I don't know what it would be like if I didn't have the podcast, but basically every week I get to talk to someone like you who's just crushing it, doing exactly what I want to do. and I'm like hearing this and it's like, whoa, that's possible. I'm talking to someone who's like a living, breathing example at a high level. And then, it's impossible to not get motivated when you hear and you're talking to someone like that. So it just snowballs and it's keeps the life force going into everything. So definitely really good advice there. For your business, have you worked? I know you said you're in the sub two mentorship. Have you worked under somebody, or is that kind of how you've been able to grow to such a level, or do you have someone that you've looked up to and learned from personally?
So we're in the sub two mentorship, but I have a mentor in my market in Idaho. Mm-hmm. And we do a lot of deals together. So the best thing I ever did was when I was starting out, and I finally got my first or second deal, instead of, and there's so much information out there now, right? Like you can kind of, all the pieces are there to be able to do your first deal. So when I finally got my first one under contract, instead of selling it myself and making the money myself, I identified who the top wholesaler was in my market, and I asked him to JV on it with me. Because it's really hard to do this, but if you can have the vision of thinking about what you want to be 100 deals from now versus this first deal, and really having that belief that you can do it, then you just want to plug into whoever the biggest power player in your market is and soak up as much information as you can from them. Because you're talking, yeah, sure, I might make an extra $10,000 if I wholesale it myself, but the amount of time that I'm going to save learning from this guy, and he's going to be somebody that actually wants to work with me and talk with me because I sent him a deal, it's going to save me years. So all this development stuff that we're doing with the multifamily, a lot of the flips that we're doing right now, it would have taken me 2 or 3 times as long if I didn't have that relationship. And it all started because I look to give value first, which is pretty rare in what we do. So
yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, that's what's been the game changer for me. Is I found someone in Arizona, just reaching out to one of the RIA groups, and then I got in touch, just basically asking if I could join the meetings and network. And then he eventually was like, "Oh, you can call this list for me." And no, that's how I got my first deal and my second and third. So providing value is the kind of the piece there that you can bring to be able to learn and really save yourself a lot of time, because those guys have went through a lot of the roadblocks that you'll end up having to go through.
Yeah. And a lot of people say that they want to add value first, but even something as small as, there's a realtor in your market and you don't have MLS access and you need them to comp some stuff for you to know if it's a deal or not. If you're doing lead generation, you're probably talking to a lot of people that want market value, but that are interested in selling in the next 6 months. If you just did a simple gesture to send your realtor those leads, because you don't really have a use for them anyways, unless there's some pain and motivation. But if there's not really any pain or motivation and you just send them to that realtor, all of a sudden they're just going to respond to you differently. Oh, this person's actually bringing me value. Mm-hmm. Even if it doesn't result in a closed deal, just that gesture shows them that, how, wow, this person values my time. That's somebody that I actually want to work with. They recognize that me comping this stuff for them costs them time. They're taking time to do this. And so it's just a really nice gesture to be able to do that. So that's something really small that I would recommend for sure.
100% agree. I think that's great advice. Okay, just to kind of bring things towards an end here, for someone listening to this that really doesn't understand where to begin or what to do, if you were to give a few action steps to someone of like, hey, do this, and this, and that'll get you on the right track, how would you direct someone to get started in real estate?
Education is the first piece. So my favorite podcast, Todd Toback is one of my favorite. He has a podcast, forget what it's called, but Wholesale Inc. I learned a lot of what I know now from Wholesale Inc. Bigger Pockets is great too. That's how I got started, just thinking about passive income and how does this all work and is it possible. Wholesale Hotline is another really good one too, with those Arizona guys. That's how to start. In reality, it's probably going to take you like a solid 6 months of that to really buy into it and feel that it's real and okay, I'm ready to take action. Mm-hmm. And then it just starts with something small that's really consistent. So even if it's just picking up the phone and calling on some Zillow for rent listings, and instead of for rent, asking them if they would consider selling, or just and taking 10 minutes a day to do that. And then the next week you do it for a half hour, and then you start writing yellow letters. Like at some point, it just becomes about putting in the action and just being very, very consistent with it. So not missing, you can miss a day here and there, but like over time, you're really going to accumulate leads and this is going to start becoming a reality. And you just need to have patience and grace through that process, because it takes most people, depending on their level of activity, anywhere from like 4 to 8 months to get their first deal, depending on how much lead generation they're doing. So to not get discouraged and really talk to people about, hey, how many leads does it take for you to get a contract? For us, it's about 22 right now at the moment. I know we're a little bit tighter on, we do more conversations on the front end to qualify that. But if I have a dialer or a system, or even if I'm just tracking myself, how many people do I need to contact? How many dials do I need to make to equal 1 lead? And then how many of those leads do I need to equal 1 contract? Because it's all a funnel, right? Mm-hmm. And this is all just a numbers game. So if you talk to enough people, or if you're struggling to get your first deal, chances are you probably just haven't talked to enough people yet. That's all it comes down to. Every time that we have ebbs and flows in our business, it's because we're just not talking to enough people. So that's all it is, man.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think people hear about all these glamorous stories. Oh, like I closed this deal and it was a slam dunk and this one went really well, but they aren't there for the take me off your list. Oh, I'm going to sue you. This, don't call me. Like the amount of people they had to filter through to get that one. There's a lot of that.
Exactly. It's insane. But again, the constant positivity to get through that. Like, I think a lot of people are just, they don't know what they don't know. They don't realize how many calls it's actually going to take to get a deal. And compounded that with how long the sales cycle is in real estate. Like sellers, they just, right? Like by the time you talk to somebody for the first time to when they trust you enough, you've built enough rapport with them, they're finally ready to make that decision to sell and sign on the dotted line. It takes a long time. So people that you talk to, for us, it's usually like from the time you first talk to somebody to then getting paid on that deal when you wholesale it, right? So that's a misconception too, is just the amount of time it takes for people it's an emotional process. Sellers, this is like one of the biggest investments most people make. It's actually a liability, but it's one of the biggest purchases most people make, right? Is their residence. And their grandma came over to visit there, and maybe they have memories, right? It's like, it just takes time. So having that understanding too, like this is all a process, and I'm eventually getting to that point where I've built enough trust and rapport. We do get those people that are like, I need to sell and I need to sell now, just not very often. Like 70% of our deals come from really intense follow-up, and we regularly get deals from like 10 months ago, from a year ago, just because that's how long it takes some people to finally like come to terms with their situation. So
yeah, my second deal I did was from following up like 4 months ago. I would just text them or call them once a month, because after a while, I'm not going to call them every week, but
Mhm.
about every month or so. And then out of nowhere, like 4 months later, hey, can you have someone look at the property on this day? And then a week later, the deal's done. It's like, what on earth?
Yeah,
It's like,
it's a timing thing too. So I think it's easy starting out. You're really hard on yourself because you want everything to be a deal, and you're like, oh man, I should have said that, and I should have said this. But it's really just a timing thing. Like if you had never talked to that person, but then somebody the day before called them, the day before they texted you, like, come look at it, they would have had a deal just fall in their lap, right? But it's just because that they were there at the right time. And if you talk to enough people, that'll happen to you. And if you follow up like that. So
yeah. Well, listen, man, I really appreciate your time and coming on and providing your insight. I think that anybody that tunes into this is going to learn a lot and get motivated. So, yeah, it's been great, man. Is there anywhere people can find you, social media, stuff like that?
yeah, reach out to me at Weimer Investments on Instagram. It's at WEIMER Investments. DM me on there. I'm always happy to help people. And just like anything in life, it's really cool to do something on your own, but it's way cooler to do it with a team or people you care about and have a shared goal and a shared mission. So just like people gave back to me their knowledge and information, I want to do the same and pay it forward. So
that's awesome. I can tell it all comes from the right place, and you're a good dude and you're going to have a lot of success. So best of luck to you, man.
right on. Appreciate it.
All right, Ryan Weimer, everybody, get wealthy.